Hi everyone, this is Nya and today I'm going to be painting a cute and simple collection of baby penguins decorated with some extra doodles, and I'm going to begin by sketching out the shapes so I can break it down. Let's first sketch out the front-facing penguin so it's much easier to see the shapes. For the head, I made a fat oval, and for the body, I made an oval which is slightly heavier at the bottom than the top, so it looks like there's a little bit more weight on the tummy. For the front-facing feet, I just drew out 3 points per feet and a couple of curved lines for the wings. I placed an oval mouth with a line in the middle at the center of the head, with 2 dots for the eyes and 2 curved lines on top of the eyes. By slightly customizing these simple shapes, you can add gestures to the baby penguins. So as an example here, I'm just going to raise the flippers and you can make them more pointy or rounded in terms of the shape. And this will just give more excited pose. You can of course change the shapes of the eyes as well to exaggerate the expression, but I want to keep the face innocent, so I just prefer to draw the 2 dots. For this next one, I'm going to play around with the positioning of the feet, and I'm going to raise one of them. This will look like the penguin is running towards you or walking towards you. I forgot to also mention I like to make the cheeks a little bit chubby, so I like to extend the bottom of the ovals with curved lines on both sides. So far we've drawn the simple front-facing penguin, so let's try to angle the view sideways. I started with the oval as the head again, but by shifting the position of the bill slightly to the left, this will make the penguin face the left side. You can follow up the other features of the face following that position. Of course, you can also shift it upwards or downwards depending on if the penguin is looking up or down, but I'm just going to keep it simple and just draw the side views. Now let's try the other side. I'm going to make a more exaggerated side view to the right this time, so I shifted the bill or the mouth further to the right. On the side of the face, I added the feature rounding off the cheek on the left, and on the right, I protrude the cheek outwards a bit more so the face isn't flat. I'm also going to connect the back of the head straight to the body, but I want to curve in the neck connecting to the body in front, and of course put more weight on the tummy. And because this is more of a side profile, we're now unable to see the flipper on the other side. Now let's draw another one that has its back towards us, so we can only see a bit of the face. Shape-wise is going to be the same as the side profile, but this time I'm going to shift the bill so it protrudes from the side with the facial feature closer to the left side. The flipper is also closer to the left side of the body, with the tail foreshortened close to the center of the butt. Lastly, let's draw once laying down on his tummy. This time I made the slight separation from the back of the head to the body, but I'm going to flatten the tummy this time since it's lying straight down so the full weight is on it. And next I'm going to draw another one with its behind mostly towards us. From here you can practice a bit with the angles and poses. You can even try to come up with more if you have any other ideas. These are just examples of things you can do, and I tried to cover a lot of the angles so you can see what the side features look like. This way you can make subtle adjustments yourself. Before I start to paint, I'm going to sketch and compose the painting. This time I'm sketching really lightly because I don't want those lines to distract the final painting. I'm starting with the one in the middle as this will be the focal point. You can mix and match the poses that I went over earlier, or you can also come up with new ones, which I'm going to try to include here as well, but I'm going to be using the same techniques that I mentioned before, and hopefully you can see by shifting the features slightly, you're able to make a completely different pose. I'm just going to sketch the rest of the penguins, scattering them around the space that I have available, and I just want to include the sketch in because I'll be including other poses as well that you might want to practice. On the top left, I'm going to draw one confused penguin. Both of the flippers will be touching its head, and I want it to be sitting down in deep thought, so I raised both of the feet up. This way the bottom should be more flat to suggest the weight. For the very last penguin, I'm going to draw it sleeping while sitting down, and this time it's going to be facing forward instead of sideways like the confused penguin. Looking at this again, I felt like the penguin on top was a bit too close to the other penguins, so I'm just going to move it closer to the edge. This is optional, but for some of the penguins with their flippers out, I'm going to make them hold a fish just to add a fun prop. That's all for the penguin sketch. Since the outline is quite dark, I'm going to lighten it by tapping my eraser over it to prep it for painting. You can also clean the outline along the way, and you can also use a kneadable eraser to do this instead of a normal eraser. Since there's still quite a bit of space in the composition, I'm going to fill it in by combining it with some doodles. You can add some abstract shapes, which I'm also going to freehand later as I paint. And I'm also going to add on some footprints and other decorative elements. For the colors, I'm going to be using Jaune Brilliant by Holbein, Vermilion by Holbein, Grey by Holbein, Sepia by Holbein, and Graphite Grey by Daniel Smith. As for the smaller details like the eyes and the bill, I'm going to be outlining it using this waterproof drawing pen by Snowman with the thickness 01. The painting process will be quite repetitive, so let's tackle the first one, which will be the confused penguin. I started by dampening the surface of the penguin head lightly while avoiding painting on the white area of the face. You should also avoid wetting the flippers as well. For the color, I'm starting with a medium consistency of Graphite Grey, and I apply the color close to the center instead of placing it close to the edges. This is because I'm painting on a damp surface, so the paint will bloom out further than the area that I've applied the paint to, which will help give the fluffy effect as the edges are a bit more unclear. With this said though, I also like to help the paint move with the tip of my brush since the surface is only slightly dampened. I like to add a darker value close to the bill of the penguin while the surface is still damp, so the transition is much smoother and the color doesn't look too flat. For the body, I'm going to use a very light consistency of Grey with a touch of Graphite Grey, and I'm placing it on the left side as well as under the face first. Then with whatever is left on my brush, I try to pull it inwards to fill in the rest of the space. I want the surface to be very lightly dampened just like the head, and while the surface is still damp, I'm going to add a bit more Graphite Grey into the mix to create a slightly darker value, and I'm going to place this for the shadow area on the bottom left as well as behind the face on the flipper. Just like the head, I want to make sure that the transition is nice and smooth, so I like to help it out by moving the paint around with my clean damp brush. And this is how you can also soften the transition if the surface is completely dry. Under the face, hidden behind the flipper, there's still a little bit of that black feature, so I'm just going to add it in. And since I painted such a small area, I want the surface to be dry. For the bill or the mouth, you can either use yellow or orange, but as for me, I'm just going to keep it simple and use the light gray. Now let's move on to the penguin in the middle. I'm painting using the same method again by dampening the surface of the head or the black area of the head. Then I'm going to place a medium consistency of Graphite Grey, helping the paint move very slowly with the tip of my brush. After I've spread out the color, the surface should still be a touch damp, so I'm going to follow it up using a darker value, which I started near the bill, then extending it outwards. Next, Next, for the body, this time I'm going to dampen the surface, and this time I want to try to add a bit of color variation by introducing sepia for a bit of a warmer tone. I still started with the graphite gray and the gray of gray mix for the tip of the flippers to make it slightly darker, and then I'm going to follow this up with a bit of sepia. This is completely optional. In fact, by the end of the painting, I actually prefer the cleaner look of just using the light gray instead, but I'm just laying down options for you so you can always adjust to your taste. For this penguin, I like to place the darker value surrounding the flippers and also around the tummy, so the lighter area of the tummy looks like it's protruding outwards. So I'm just going to slowly build the color up. You can choose between the wet on wet method, or you can use the wet on dry method by softening the edges with a clean damp brush. And that's basically the main technique for the base color, so I'm just going to continue to paint the rest of the penguins for now. For the sleeping penguin, you don't have to avoid painting on top of the feet because we're going to paint them using a darker value later on, so it's okay to just paint over it for now. As for the penguin that has its back towards us, I'm going to paint this one slightly differently compared to the others, since we can see the connection between the head and the body, which will be different colors. For this, instead of only dampening the area for the head, I continued the dampness slightly lower. This way will create a better transition between those two colors. The surface should still be damp now, and I'm going to continue it straight away with the lighter gray. After leaving the body for a while, the surface should start to dry, so now I can use a darker value to separate the flipper from the rest of the body. Don't forget to also paint the flipper that's holding the fish. Once I finish painting on the base color, I'm going to go back to the previous penguins to increase the value and redefine the form, since the base color are a little bit faded now that it's dry. I'm not going to go over every single area, but just mostly the head to darken it further, and also add some shadows around the body and flippers to create a smoother three-dimensional form. This time I'm also not going to wet the surface beforehand. Instead, I'm just going to dot in some paint to create an uneven surface on the dry paper. And if the edges needs a little bit of smoothing, I just use the clean damp brush to spread the paint around those edges. At the same time, I also want to start painting the feet using a medium consistency to a thick consistency of graphite gray. And to paint the feet, I want to make sure that the surface of the paper is completely dry, so there's a clear definition. Once I'm fairly happy with the form, I'm going to start adding on the details like the eyes. And for this, I'm going to switch to my waterproof pen. It's very important to use waterproof pen here because I'm still going to paint over it. And I'm also going to add a line in between the mouth or the bill. The reason why I'm not going to paint over the face first is because I'm going to erase any extra pencil marks at this point. Then I'm going to paint on the details or the form of the face by using a really light consistency of gray to add some shadows, and this will also help make the cheeks look more puffy. I like to use this color to line the inner part of the eye as well as around the cheeks and the bottom of the face. Then I use the clean damp brush to soften the edges. After this, I'm going to add a little bit of blush as extra accent color to the whole composition, and for this I'm going to use a thin consistency mix of Vermilion and Jaune Brilliant to create this peachy color. I'm just painting on this small oval on top of the cheeks. You do have to make sure that the base color is completely dry so the pink or the peach color doesn't run anywhere. Now to complete the penguins, I'm just going to use a medium to thick consistency of graphite gray to paint the whole fish. I'm also going to do the same thing for the fish doodle on top. Since I really like the clean monochrome look with just the pink as accent, I'm just going to paint the rest of the doodles like the footprints with the graphite gray as well. And once I'm done with the footprints, I'm also going to add dots and other abstract shapes to fill in the rest of the space. I found that painting the shape of the footprints was a little bit tricky since I am painting on a very small area here. So for a little trick, I find it much easier to paint a trident or a fork shape first, then add two curved lines to join those points, then fill in the rest of the space. For the additional abstract doodles, I'm just going to add some dashed lines, some of them going vertically and some going horizontally. Then at some point, after I add on extra details like the footprints here on the right hand side and also the face for the fish and such, I accidentally smudge one of those dashed lines. It's off angle at the moment, but to get rid of this mess, I end up just using a lighter gray from Gray of Gray and Graphite Gray, or just a light consistency of Graphite Gray to add larger light gray circles, either just standing alone or combined with some of the dashed lines. You can see at the bottom there, that's where I accidentally smudged the paint. And from here, I just want to balance everything out, and that's it for this painting. If you guys enjoyed this tutorial and would like to see more like this, please feel free to subscribe. Like usual, all the list of tools as well as my social media links will be in my description box. If you guys are still here, thank you so much for watching to the end, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Bye!